Males are, for the most part, not terribly important to Mother Nature. Just one male is important to Mother Nature. Yet every girl is extraordinarily important to Mother Nature. Every egg is sacred when it comes to girls. So it just plays out in the evolution that particular gender is preserved or kept away from the fighting. But how do they develop their power? And it is through that social aggression. Add to that the social rules that women weren't citizens. They couldn't own property. They couldn't be in power. And so in the courts, and in society, they did their battle socially and very calculatedly and psychologically damaging. Men out to the duel field, right? Oh, you've insulted me, sir. Off to the duel field. We settle our differences. A much more simple, certainly more dangerous, physically dangerous manner in which one settles differences. But that's playing out now, and it seems like we've given this this amplification of the technical equivalent of psychostimulant drugs to this thing.
What is going on, everyone? Tis Miyanovich, and I welcome you to the main dojo, the place where we process the raw struggles of men in an unprecedented paradigm. There is something inside of you that wants you to be more than what you are. But there also may be something inside of you that wants you to go down. And for some of us, that means going down for good. So, remove your ego, drop your bullshit, become vulnerable, and step into the dojo, mate. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the dojo. Tis Miyanovich, and tis a good day to be in the dojo. Today I have another fantastic guest. To describe our guest today, I would use the term world beater. If you're not familiar with the term world beater, it is a person who is born with certain characteristics and traits that they combine with a dogged pursuit of something in life, and mostly but not entirely as an individual can have a paradigm-shifting effect on the world around them or the world in general. Mr. John Van Dreal is a world beater. Interestingly enough, a lot of these personalities have a tendency for high ego or high narcissism, and certainly we might be able to apply this to my friend John. We joke about it. We joke about John's narcissism. But really it's no more than mine. John has a boatload of humility and is just an excellent person and a great-hearted human. He is, however, a world-tier subject matter expert and most definitely a paradigm-shifting world beater. Those that know about John's importance in the world of school security and student threat assessment, behavioral threat assessment, know that he is that guy. So all of these terms, world beater, paradigm shifter, should be magical for John's ego today. And I hope that they are. And I hope that they fuel him for more of the challenges to come. Because my role and my experience in the gun owning space has led me to the place where we look at the negative things that happen with guns. And the school shootings phenomenon is a giant cultural phenomenon now and is massively damaging to the world around us, our society. And this has implications for all of us, but it certainly has implications for men and maleness because the vast majority of school shooters are males. And the vast majority of the impetus to engage in planning and executing a school shooting has to do with male psychology, or aspects of male psychology. That's what we are going to be talking about today. But I just wanted to let everybody know, if you haven't listened to the podcast that I have, which is called The Liberal Gun Owner's Lens, that's the organization. You probably have figured that out by now. On The Liberal Gun Owner's Lens, we talk about the importance of mitigating school shootings. You may not know this if you haven't heard the Liberal Gun Owners Lens podcast, but all of the school shootings that you see, they're tragic and they're terrible, but there are also many school shootings that are stopped regularly. And this is where, as I said on our episode with Dr. Stephanie Leida, this is why it's important for old Miyanovich to be positioned where he is and not for me to be positioned where John is or where Dr. Stephanie is positioned, because they have a certain scientific criteria that they need to adhere to when they speak. And I don't. And I think that that's valuable. And it's valuable for the following reason, because I can say to you that school shootings get stopped. And I can say to you, John Van Dreal stops school shootings. Dr. Stephanie Leida stops school shootings. The system that John has devised for stopping school shootings, the Salem-Kaiser Cascade system, regularly stops school shootings. There are other systems in this country also that stop school shootings. But everybody needs to know that what you see are the school shootings that got away from us. You would likely see potentially 2 times to 3 times more school shootings if it were not for this interesting art/science called behavioral threat assessment. And John is the architect of the system, the Salem-Kaiser Cascade model, which is known as the gold standard for behavioral threat assessment in the K through 12 realm. So what does that mean? I'll say it because John won't say it. I'll say it because these other people can't say it. Is that John's system is the best system on planet Earth for stopping school shootings. They will say it is about diversion of behavior. You know, if you divert a behavior, was it really going to end up in a school shooting or not? We really can't tell. That's true. How can you prove something that didn't happen, right? Scientifically. That's where they need to speak. Where I need to speak is I need to say that this system that John has devised stops school shootings. End of story. And so what do we need to aspire to as a society? Well, we need to use proven things to stop school shootings. And John's system is a proven way to stop school shootings. There are other systems out there that also work, but John's system is the gold standard. And in this discussion that we have today, we will be talking about why understanding male psychology, particularly adolescent male psychology, is critical for stopping school shootings. We get into the whole gambit, John and I, about all things male psychology and society. But the real nugget here is to talk about what John is really known for and what he's all about. Let me just read for you from his website the first paragraph blurb of his bio. John Van Dreal is a school psychologist and retired director of the Safety and Risk Management Services Department for the Salem-Kaiser School District. That's in Oregon. He has more than 35 years of experience in threat assessment and management, psychoeducational evaluation, crisis intervention, behavioral intervention, and security and risk management systems consultation. He is the recipient of the 2024 Association of Threat Assessment Lifetime Achievement Award and is recognized internationally as an expert in threat assessment and as a pioneer of multidisciplinary threat assessment. That's a lot of wordy words. But I just wanted to get you guys an understanding of the level of John's professionalism and his effect. You can always go to vandrealconsulting.com and check out what John's doing, or you can just Google or search John Van Dreal. The spelling is in the advertisement for this podcast. So that's enough of my yapping. The real juice here is in the discussion. So join me, won't you, for this discussion with my friend and world beater subject matter expert, John Van Dreal, and step into the dojo, man. More, I think you're just in the best position. You're in a better position than the rest of us because this shit is for the birds, man. What's happening with tech and people? Oh my God, John.
It's alarming. It's alarming. I think I told you my goal is to get back to a flip phone, like a real flip phone, not the pretend ones they make today, like where you have to text using the numbers. You know, one is A, hit one twice and it's a B, hit one 3 times and it's a C. That kind of shit. Get back to that. I would love to do that. I think I'm 3 years away, maybe 4.
I'm on that same path too. And I think a lot of people are waking up to it, man. Like, well, yeah, there's the crew that's not ever going to wake up to it and they're just going to go headlong with wherever this shit keeps going.
Yeah.
But from older people down to now kids are like getting sick of it a bit.
Yeah, this new generation in high school, it's interesting. And maybe some in college. I'm half wondering if they might be, the Gen Zers might be the ones to disconnect and deprogram.
Jonathan Haidt, we talk about Jonathan Haidt a bunch, his work, right? You know Jonathan Haidt?
Yeah, I'm not as, we've talked a little bit, but I haven't read much of it, if any.
So that's where he is now. I mean, he's been on the social psychological negative impacts on females, teen females, because that's where the data really is.
Yeah.
The self-harm, the depression, and the attempted suicide and suicide numbers since the implementation of social media. Not necessarily in the beginning of the internet, but right around when social media started to become a motherfucker, like 2010. But he like has his daughters involved in all of this, like these like social groups where when you go in, everybody puts their phone in the basket. Like he's on the cutting edge of that shit now. That's like where he's at.
Yeah.
So there's some good signs, I think.
Good. Yeah, I hope so.
I just talked with Stephanie last week, Stephanie Lida, and it's one of the things that we talked about was we can't even like fathom this water that kids are in right now. Like,
yeah, I knew nothing like that growing up. And I was a little aware of the Mean Girls stuff in high school, but not as aware as I became once I had a daughter who was in school. And that was pre-smartphones. So she went through a lot of what girls go through anyway. And I was astounded. And I looked back and I thought, I think girls were doing that to each other in high school. And it's not that that was worse than what boys were doing. It was just that boys put it out there. Like if somebody called you an asshole, you fought it out. You dealt with it. But there weren't the layers of social aggression that I saw with my daughter and her peers when she went through school. I believe it probably was there when I went to high school in the 70s, but I can't imagine what that has to be like with it amplified to the level that social media amplifies. My daughter was kind of on the front end of instant messenger. So there would be instant messages that would show up on her computer while she was doing her homework at night. And I finally had to shut that down. I just said, okay, we're going to do homework a different way. No more IM at night, because she could go from being just the absolutely sweetest kid who was having a great day to pure misery because of one instant message. And it was a little bit of that is because of the anonymity of it, and or at least you're not face to face. Whereas before instant message and texting, kids had to say that shit to each other's face or behind their backs, but not through some sort of cloaked manner that removed them of the consequences. Or they had to make a phone call and say, hey, you had the wrong shoes on today. You're out of the club. But now it's like whoop, right in there. And then there's this whole, string of arguments in the comments. That's just gross, man. It's just gross. It's with guys too. I mean, it's everybody. It's everybody now is doing this. But I think that, like you said, the data with girls is not just telling, that it's somewhat dooming. I think, like, I don't think we can sustain this and have healthy kids in the next 100 years.
Well, you can't trump as a verb, not capital T's multi, but you can't trump 300,000 years of Homo sapien evolution and then all of the hominin evolution that came for millions of years before that. That's in the wiring, but in the Homo sapien part of it, our meat and potatoes differences between ourselves and Homo erectus that developed during a time where we're hunter gatherers and perhaps arguably we're settling down a little bit, and so. What's your largest group number there that you're being social with? It's going to be typically about 25, but you're going to get to mega tribes somewhere around 70,000 BCE. So that mega tribe is only going to go 150, 200. So your wiring is designed to take to deal with assholes and bullshit for really about 25 people.
Yeah.
And then
And face to face for the most part.
Yeah. And you
in person.
Stretch into 200. You're worried about this segment of the mega tribe and that segment. We're plugging into the entire fucking globe at once.
Yeah.
Like, is it any wonder?
I think the big jump went to the city state. And I mean, that had some positive impacts on people's behavior, because once you had the city state, folks aligned themselves with the ruler of that city state. We saw the advancement of manners, decorum, and rules in order to keep that city state running. So I like the positive aspects of that. But then, I think if you look at Rome, for example, you had the neighborhoods, and you had very regionalized law enforcement that families and, I guess, clans took care of themselves. I don't think we've ever seen anything like this. I don't know that the brain's capable of it, but what I think is interesting, something that I've noticed, again, along with the way violence plays out with genders, is an increase in physical aggression with girls. And when they go fist to cuff, they mean it. Like, they fight. Whereas you breaking up a boy fight about half the time in school, they want you to break that fight up. All you have to do is walk up and pull the belt back, and they're mother effer, and they're climbing over you, but they're not really climbing over you, right? Mm-hmm. Hold me back, and they're pulling you back. You step into a girl fight, and that's a different experience. And there are more and more of those. And I think it's because prior to maybe the last 20 years, girls they serviced their aggression to this social aggression and these layers. Fighting was inappropriate for girls. It wasn't ladylike or girl-like. And so they exercised a social aggression that, as a gender, had been a way of doing business for a couple 100,000 years, because men did the fighting. Males did the fighting. They had the muscle mass. Males are, for the most part, not terribly important to Mother Nature. Just one male is important to Mother Nature. Yet every girl is extraordinarily important to Mother Nature. Every egg is sacred when it comes to girls. So it just plays out in the evolution that particular gender is preserved or kept away from the fighting. But how do they develop their power? And it is through that social aggression. Add to that the social rules that women weren't citizens. They couldn't own property. They couldn't be in power. And so in the courts, and in society, they did their battle socially and very calculatedly and psychologically damaging. Men, out to the duel field, right? Oh, you've insulted me, sir. Off to the duel field. We settle our differences. A much more simple, certainly more dangerous, physically dangerous manner in which one settles differences. But that's playing out now, and it seems like we've given this this amplification of the technical equivalent of psychostimulant drugs to this thing. And what it has amplified is that social aggression in very sabotaging ways. And then, because it keeps going, that's where you get these girls into fighting situations, because they've exhausted the means that they used to rely on. And now they're face to face finally. And all this stuff was said on social media, stuff that would have never gone to that level in a small village or even a school in the 70s, where your friendship group or your social group is the clique you're in and a couple hundred other students in your class.
Yeah. It seems to me too that the digital aspect of it is inducing ADHD, its own like if you don't have some attention deficit, hyperactive looping thing in your brain naturally, or maybe all of us have the propensity for it and only some people end up manifesting it and others don't. But the dopaminergic reality of the internet, at any point you can get the information on the other side of the hill. We want that information from what's on the other side of the hill. Our survival might depend upon it as chieftains, as chiefs, as whatever. We want the information from the other side of the hill. From inside of the village, we want that gossip information from that other ant or female because our position or our next move might depend upon it. So this machine is representing the information on the other side of the hill and the information, the catty gossip from anywhere at all moments. And so our brain is just like, I've got to go there. I've got to go there and get it. I've got to go and get the information. I've got to go and so it seems like the brains are getting this, like, it's like an ADHD. It's like it's a fast looping, low resilience, right, to holding back. It just keeps pulling your face into the fucking machine over and over and over again. And it's not surprising what you're saying, right, about the physical fighting. These kids are also, their prefrontal cortex isn't even fucking developed yet. So you and I are fully developed, and we're not even fully in control of ourselves.
Yeah, I'm terribly immature and impulsive. I'm 63.
Right. So
I hope mine develops eventually. I think that'd be great if my wife would agree that maybe I should grow up at some point. But I have friends like you, and that makes it hard.
Well, I like to keep us held back. There's something sexy about a man who's a fucking retard. There's just something sexy about it. And if not, that's what we tell ourselves. But the device itself and the dopaminergic hits, it's like a hand pulls out of the screen and grabs you by the neck and just slams your face into it. Just keeps pulling your fucking face into it. And boy, so we're talking about there's a difference between boys and girls. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about the girls for a second, because I have this shit going on with dudes in my circle, and I certainly have been a part of this before. The female social aggression, female aggression. So it's like paper cuts and mosquito bites versus nuclear bombs, right? It is just a constant fucking paper cutting of the other people around them, a constant testing. Mm-hmm. And to me, in my observation, many females don't even do it consciously. It's like a subconscious thing from the inner chimpanzee that is just trying to needle every fucking person in their proximity into a state of being lesser, or a state that the female can control them or influence them or make sure that they're not a threat. So let's talk about that a bit. You lived inside of high schools for a long time. Is this constant needling something that you observe, and have you observed it in relationships and like in your adult life too?
I definitely have seen it in adolescent life, and I honestly think that it's part of the developmental process for both genders. But the way it gets handled with the genders is different. That from more of a masculine side of things, it's more abrupt. It has more machismo tied to it, but it also has a threat and a consequence that checks it. So that that pecking order of the strongest is clearly honored for the most part with young men, because you get your ass kicked if you don't. With girls, you didn't get your ass kicked. That's happening more now than it used to, but so the layers of that needling are harder to see because it's so sophisticated. And just incredibly sophisticated social structures, both positive and negative, with young women, far more than young men. I mean, they are more mature at their age than males until about age 20. They're emotionally or they're intellectually ahead. They're processing differently and in more advanced ways. Interestingly, that doesn't show up on IQ tests because the distribution is very similar. But when it is applied, it is apparent that the brain's working differently at that time. And then our hope is that as educators and parents, we grow them up to a level of maturation where they can check the chimpanzee instinct because they're humans, and we've learned to transcend some of that and evolve socially past it, even though our brains and our biology haven't, that we still have the impulse, that we still have the structures, that we do go to self-defense very quickly. And self-defense and inner brain stuff is categorization and stereotyping. It's categorizing people because they're not wearing what they should, and stereotyping because they're losers or whatever they are. And the reason we do that is we only want, historically, from an evolutionary perspective, we want to be with people like us. It's safer than the unknown. And so it's easy. Our brains do that as a mechanism to keep us protected. And I think girls especially do that because their egos are developing and they want to feel wanted and appreciated, like all humans do. And so, checking it through some of those cliquish behaviors, those little razor cuts, is a natural process. When they become adults, just like males, they start transcending that. If they're healthy, they get past it. They embrace either a religious structure or a philosophical structure or self-help structure because it makes them so miserable to behave like that in the end in contemporary society. It used to save your life 10,000 years ago. Yeah. You kept with your clan, man. You just were real careful about who else you let in. But today it causes such misery that people then turn to some sort of regime of treatment, whether it's therapy, religion, or philosophy. But there are those that don't. And in my adult life, you asked me if I've run into this in adult life. I certainly have. I worked in education for years that interacted with law enforcement. Right. I'm not going to use stereotypes, but there's some accuracy to both those industries. And the mean-spirited stuff that happens politically behind the scenes to sabotage other employees in education, especially within the power structures, teachers and administrators, counselors, can be very juvenile. And again, you're dealing with this bell curve of people. Yeah. So while there is a healthy kind of center of that at the top of the bell curve, and you get out into the, the second percentile or the 16th percentile on the bottom end, you get some very unhealthy people. The cool thing is you get up into the second percentile at the top end and you get some really healthy people that are great leaders and can inspire people. But those that are in those positions who are healthier, have a more stable approach. And I tend to refer to them as less passionate people. Mm-hmm. They just tend to be there. They're not the people that are saying, I'm passionate about my job, and they don't moral grandstand. They do their job and they're committed, but they're able to leave it. They are the ones that can only do that work for so long. And the greater the crisis, the greater the work involves crisis, the less time. And it's about 11 to 15 years, you start to get a burnout. Mm-hmm. And that's not because of the crisis stuff, but because of the drama that happens within the groups that address crisis or run to the fire. And think about it. If you're in that industry, if you're working with teens all day long, there's a lot of drama. You better be a healthy person to be able to do that. Yeah. And even the healthiest people start to burn out. I burned out at about 15 years and I went into more administrative directive stuff and consulting. But one of the things I did is my wife and I both did this thing where we just started to distance ourselves as much as possible from people who were that way. Not because we disliked them, but because they were energy drainers and they weren't energy givers. And so we just limited our time. Luckily, our friendship base just didn't, for the most part, involve people like that in our kind of our inner circle and even our second tier circle, whether that's luck or just the fact that you kind of look for people who kind of see life the same way you do or from those same kinds of perspectives. I'm not sure. But professionally, even with my own employees, There were employees that I was extremely careful with. Everything I said, everything I did was, I tried real hard to advise them and help them through their kind of emotional coasters that were either tied to their jobs or their personal lives. And the emotional roller coaster that goes with their job, was easier for me to address. And then, the employees and the people the colleagues that I worked with that had that kind of have a similar view of life, and the importance of not becoming highly emotional about every little aspect of crisis, and kind of learning to detach on some level to be effective. Those are the people that I did do business with. I continue to do business with, and I continue to this day to want to be around them, work with them. I can rely on them. They can rely on me. We feed each other business, drinks, dinner, all of that stuff. That happens. And so today I can say I'm not around much of it. And if it starts to happen, I'm like, off the table.
I've got a couple notes based on the things that you just said. This is like sort of an offshoot from like the gender discussion, but you said that you find that people who have passion, really high passion for belief, are people who tend to shortcut, short circuit, yeah. But also they seem to be the group of people that you are going to be being friends with or interacting with less. And that's interesting because I'm sure many people have that observation, but I have that observation with people online. You simply, the more that somebody is like, inflamed by a belief, the less temperance they have, the less they have access to the road of reason, and they become an unreasonable person, a person who doesn't evolve. Even, you would think as liberals, you see liberals believing in fighting for the little people, fighting for the marginalized people. But I have been observing for fucking 15 years straight that it's almost like an addictive loop, and they're so impassioned by it that they just don't ever fucking grow up or evolve.
Yeah.
They're stuck in this binary of fuck you if you don't believe exactly how I believe, even shitting on their own side.
Yeah. If you're not for me, you're against me. And that, you just brought up social media, the people that are ranting and passionate and doing that kind of stuff on social media. There's a diagnostic feature to social media. If you want to find your borderline personalities and your narcissistic personality disorders, pretty easy to find them on social media. But what social media has done is invited more people who really don't have those kinds of disorders, but may spike in areas of narcissism or kind of borderline, what used to be called histrionic behavior, that kind of stuff. It invites them to go ahead and be that way. And that is the arrested development that takes place. Now, again, if you just look at this bell curve, there will always be that group of people that are disruptive and sabotaging to relationships. And they tend to be what we used to call axis 2 personality disorders. They are narcissists and borderlines, and to some degree, schizotypical personality disorders. They're hard to hang out with, because they are so binary in their thinking, and they really do see the world from a lens, and it's hard to convince them otherwise, that if someone isn't with them, they are automatically against them. And that is such an adolescent perspective. That's very typical of adolescence. Again, this is to be expected of a 16, 15-year-old kid to think that way. It's our job to grow them past that. But they don't seem to be growing up these days. There are a lot of folks that still do that in the political spectrum. Both sides of the aisle has this kind of fringe group who are very much binary thinkers. If you're not for me or against me, you're not just a fellow American with a difference of opinion who I don't particularly like. You are the enemy, deserving of, everything from humiliation to execution. You see shit said on social media. We might have said it in a joking way in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, but people are really mean that. Now, where it gets to be problematic is when they work for you, or you have to work with them, or you're advising them. And often the first thing someone like that says is, I'm very passionate about my job, which means I care more than you, by the way. There's a subtext of that. I'm passionate. I care. I pick up the phone at night. I spend all my weekends worrying about, blah, blah, blah. And that's the two messages for me there. One is they're saying they care more. And if you're not like them, you're not good enough. You're not with them. And shame on you for not being passionate about your job. And two, they have terrible boundaries. And that passion will definitely take them down at some point. They'll probably write it out and be some of the most miserable people you ever work with, because at that point they become nihilists and they just hate everything because it didn't work and their idealism went into the toilet. And that's a hard thing to train a 50-year-old person past. I mean, honestly, they have to go through almost some sort of a retreat transition, like a religious experience, to kind of change that mindset. But my thoughts about passion, and people, I mean, it's very popular to say, man, this guy is so great. He's so passionate about his work. I automatically go, okay, well, then there's a red flag. And I'm going to make sure, if I'm working with this person, I take into consideration that if they believe they're that passionate in others, that maybe they're too passionate. That being committed to your work allows you to do it well. Loving your work allows you to do work. Being passionate about it, this is everything I am. I was born to do this. This is a calling. Creates a dangerous person, because they're the ones that put the rest of us in the way of gunfire, because they push that envelope constantly with their passion. I used to tell my folks in my office, which was a risk management, emergency management, violence prevention, suicide prevention, and school security office. So no day ever dawned without having trouble in it, right? I used to say, as your boss, please don't try to impress me with your passion. Just do a really good job and learn your lessons from it. But I want you to go home at night and unplug. I want you to do you at night. Like, go home and be with your kids and be present. This is your job. It's what you signed up for. And I'm so pleased that you love doing it. That I love doing it. It's great. It's work, but it's an enjoyable work. But I need you to be able to be indifferent. And that was always hard for them to digest, because they thought indifferent meant that you don't care. It doesn't. It means I care. I'm going to do this job well, but my indifference is that I don't control how it's going to turn out. I'm going to do everything I can to influence it, but it may not turn out the way I want. We may have problems. We may have a tragedy. We may have an almost tragedy. And if I did everything I could with the resources I had and the information I had, I did my job. And I have to be able to say, the way it turns out is the way it's going to turn out. And my indifference doesn't mean that it won't make me sad or troubled, or I might not grieve it. Those are natural processes. But it isn't going to wreck and ruin my life. It's not going to destroy me in my relationships, because I can say I'm indifferent. At the end of the day, the only thing I control is what's up here. Everything else I don't. I just influence. And so the passionate people have trouble accepting that. They want to control everything, including you. And if you're not as excited as they are about this problem, and you're not yelling, screaming, and gnashing teeth, then you are a lesser person to them. And that's a hard person to hang out with or be with professionally, either way, for any length of time. At some point, you have to box them out. And if they're your employees, you set those boundaries, you set your expectations, and you don't allow them to push your buttons with all of that, because it can kind of push your buttons.
You just described the entirety of the very online left wing in America. That's the entirety of that. More specifically, the further left aspect of it. You just described the psychology of it. Now, that's a podcast that I want to do, just a podcast with you on just that, because it is an enormous problem. I do want to go back to paper cutting, social, the social game, and females paper cutting and mosquito biting. And I do want to talk about the genders specifically, because you said something in there that was like about establishing and figuring out the hierarchy and leaving the alpha alone. Essentially, the alpha gets left alone, and then everybody else kind of gets it. And that's not just women. Women and men are doing it. But that a game is also afoot within women. And here's why I want to talk about it, is because we have in our community and on this podcast, we had our first guest. He has a situation that's similar to mine, and it's called what I call the curse of the helper man. And that is, you were raised by a mom who put you in the position of having to be the adult or having to be the nursey caregiver person to mom because mom wasn't getting what she needs. So this pattern is set up inside of you as a man that your way to relate to people and women is to help, is to be a helper man. But you lack a masculine boundary because it was not given to you or erased from your upbringing. And so all of your karma is the karma of a boundaryless helper man. And when you are a boundaryless helper man, the curse is you are constantly being fucking bombarded by the people you're helping with these paper cuts, or from society in general, or from anything, because you're not signaling as somebody, as a male with a boundary. You're signaling as, I'm here to help. I'm a good guy. I'm here to help. And specifically in intimate relationships or familial relationships, these people, and often women, are not getting the signal to back the fuck off. Don't do it. So their subconscious doesn't stop. And so the curse of the helper man is a curse that just slowly drains a man over time, and downward goes his hormones, downward goes his immunity, downward goes his psychology, downward goes any self-esteem he had. But it's slow and almost it's hard to measure. And you could see a family of loving people, and you would think the wife loves the husband and the kids love, but the wife and the kids and the grandma and the aunts are all fucking paper cutting this dude to death. So this is common. I see it. And I want to hear from you about that, about you're a dude. You're not really projecting as the alpha. Your thing is just, I love you and I'm going to help you. And everybody around you is like paper cutting you to death.
Well, let me ask one question about your belief about that. Do you see that? I see the messianic syndrome happen in many ways with men and women. The messianic syndrome with the passionate, of course. I'm the Messiah. I will fix everything. But you have a kind of a masculine messianic syndrome that can happen with narcissistic men, but it's very two-dimensional. It's easy to see beneath the layer that they're not really there to help you. Then there are, and this is the first I've heard of the helper dude. I love it, by the way. The need to be that Messiah, to fix and rescue, that particular habit that a young man might grow up with can lead to is something that you can't sustain it. And so, do you see that messianic syndrome as a part of the helper dude? Is that how you're seeing the helper dude?
I don't. I think that in these instances, and it's almost always with the mother, prior to the development of individuality or the first stages of the development of individuality, this thing steps inside of the helper man and puts him into a place where the only self is to help. The only self is to make mom not get mad. The only self is to help the kids because the other siblings, because mom has no nurturance. And everything goes to shit if this younger person, male, doesn't give love and nursing and nurturance and keep mom cool and so on and so forth. So it could develop into a messianic thing, but I don't think it starts there. I think it's more like it is just like an implant. Does that make sense? That happens.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was wondering, is that it could go that direction, but the difference would be that if it develops into that kind of messianic syndrome, is that it would be more three-dimensional than the narcissist that tries to pretend to be the Messiah.
Yeah.
The one who solves everyone's problems. So to go back to the paper cutting, and this, To me, this kind of sets up a situation that can happen with your children too. Again, boys and girls kind of handle their fathers differently. But there is, in the adolescent mind and those that don't grow up. So when I say adolescent, I know and have worked with a lot of 45-year-old adolescents. I have an older brother who's 60. He's 5 years older than me. So he's going to be turning 68 here before long. And he's still very much about a 14-year-old. The way he thinks, and there's some endearing qualities to that because he's youthful and funny in many ways. But then it's the sad stuff that the guy really is stuck. And I've never, I don't judge him for that. I get it. I know why he's stuck there, and I understand he has a different genetic line than I do somehow. But what happens is the helper man can set up an "I love you, I hate you, please leave me, don't go" situation. So we're going to go back to what we were saying about personality disorders. You're either for me, you're against me, right? If you're not for me, you are the evil enemy that needs to be destroyed, humiliated, shamed, dehumanized. You're no better than an animal. The very people that talk about keeping the idea or keeping the knowledge and the memory of the Holocaust very much present on the far left are people that will dehumanize their enemies or perceived enemies at the same level that Nazis dehumanized Jews and other people that they disliked. They will do the same thing, and which is interesting because the Nazis were binary thinkers as well. So go back to this: "I love you, I hate you, please leave me, don't go." That's the bumper sticker of a borderline personality disorder. So "I love you, I hate you, please leave me, don't go." And you're trapped in the middle of this. Now, again, that's just a small segment of the population. But if you set up a dynamic in your household where you are rescuing, where you don't have boundaries, you're setting yourself up to some degree to be disdained by the very people you're trying to help, who say they love you and at the same time kind of hate you sometimes and want you out of their face because they don't want the help, and then they do want the help. And you're setting up a very much a dysfunctional dynamic that won't evolve unless you get the hell out of there and you do put those boundaries down. And a lot of parents do that anyway. In today's world, the helicopter parent is the rule. It's not the exception. It used to be the exception. I grew up, played sports with my friends. Very few parents even went to the games. I mean, it's like, hey, that's your thing. You're going to play basketball. I got chores to do, John. And now, like, you're the asshole if you don't go to your kids' practices. There's a happy medium in there. I probably would have liked it if my parents had gone to my games a few times, but I didn't think about it. And, that's okay. And nobody else is going to their kids' games. But back to this kind of dynamic, that's a dynamic of many families right now. And if I want to just jump over to this kind of plight of, men's issues and that sort of thing, look, I'm not complaining because it's great to be a dude and be a white guy and an old guy. I appreciate my privilege, and I appreciate that I haven't had to work as hard. I can't change any of that. So I'm not going to say, oh, look at poor me. But I will say that the idea of being a man today is difficult to nail down. You have your societal pressures. You have your relationship dynamics that you have to navigate, and how you're judged by others. And as you navigate those, are you the breadwinner? Because here's the thing, society still says you are the breadwinner. And we really, honestly, most of us would say absolutely would love to share that. And we try to share that as much as we can with the women in our lives. But at the end of the day, everything kind of looks at us and says, well, did you do it? They generally, it still hasn't become equal in that manner. One step in that direction would be equal pay and some things that would, I hope we're headed that way. I don't know right now with this election, but I feel like we were heading in those directions. But then the next thing is this toxic masculinity piece. And what does that mean? Because it means something different to the different groups that describe it. There are those that would say simply being male in any way is toxic, right? Like what I'm saying now could be viewed as toxic by some folks. There are others that would say, no, that toxic masculinity is abusive control, dominance, mansplain, talk down to people. I totally get that. And having worked in an industry that was about 80% women, education, I learned very, very quickly how to be careful about that stuff because, growing up that in the 70s and the 80s is how you talked. You were the authority, you're the patriarch, however that was set up. And I don't subscribe to those kinds of ideas. I don't. But I recognize the fact that they're implanted in us. And as you said, we got 150 to 200,000 years of Homo sapien history that kind of established all that. Then all the social rules and all of the legal structure that surrounded, created by men to protect men and give men control. Absolutely. And so, getting past that as a parent in a home or a teacher, as a dad or a husband, I think that's more difficult to navigate today than it ever has been, probably because there were a lot of wrong aspects before and we just did it. And now we're trying to figure out how to really how to find those things that are toxic, and dysfunctional and weed them out without throwing, the baby out along with the bathwater.